moving forward to the ideation and process section of your research binder. So I put these two together because the ideation and process is one of the huge parts of the design phase. And I feel like previously the way we were going about that in my classes, you were doing it, but you didn't really get to see that full culmination of the process come together. So this is another reason we're going to turn in the binder so you can see how far you actually come. And it's also really good to put process pieces in a graphics portfolio. People want to see the final product, but they also really want to see how you think and how you got there. And this is training you to track that and keep track of that process and that journey. So with ideation and process, just to kind of break down, like the first time that you think about designing for something or creating for someone, obviously you want to learn about your audience, you want to define the problem, and then in the middle here is the ideate, where you start thinking of ideas and tossing things back and forth, whether by yourself or with others, and you explore solutions. And then you get to the point where you start prototyping. So this is where you actually start designing something. Okay, look at where design is down on this. This is the fourth step. So you really, the first couple of phases is really thinking and, massaging that problem until you feel like you're at a place where you can get to the design phase. And then test, you show prototypes to your audience, or for example, we critique each other and give feedback, and then that just makes your work more effective. So that's just a quick overview of that process. For some projects, I will ask you to use specific ideation devices. Sometimes you can choose them on your own, but for the first few projects, I will say, hey, use a list to help walk through this. And there's a couple of different options. There's mind mapping. There's a great example here. I'm not going to go through each little bit of this information because I know you guys can read this, but essentially, I'm going to zoom in on this here. Essentially, the way the mind map works is that you start with a central idea. So, for example, if you're doing a logo for Scouts, right? Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, I don't know. But say that we're starting, that's where we're starting. So we're starting a central point there. And then we have, typically you want to bubble. You want to put each little thought in a bubble, but that's okay. We have the central idea, and then we have the second tier. Okay, you see the shorter lines, that's our second tier. And then we have things that go into the third tier. So we're sifting those ideas out further and further until things get more concrete and we can draw those connections. So just a quick way, you use the keyword in the middle of the page. The keyword becomes your main idea, and you start to write down the topics related to that, and you use a line to connect the topics that relate back to the keyword. So, we see here uniform has scarf and badges because those both connect to the concept of uniform. Okay, so we can see where those connections start to form. And then our third step is start thinking of each topic and write down subtopics. So this is what we've got here. We've got the main topics and we've got the subtopics, and then where things connect, we're putting those together. So fire has three offshoots. Maybe if one of those words related to something over here, we could connect those. It's all about finding those connections. And when you do this visually, it makes it easier to see. So your mind maps don't have to be pretty. Some people mind map electronically. If you want to do that, you can, but it's a little bit more natural and organic just to jot it down. So if you turn a mind map into me that looks something like this, that would be okay. Scan it in or take a good quality picture of it, put it in your digital document, good to go. And then you want to continue to add more ideas on the flow mentioned above and organize these ideas together. Okay, so essentially for a good mind map is at least, one main idea or topic, at least three subpoints. You'll wind up with more than that, I promise. And then at least three points off of those subpoints. So details from subpoints you can form into lists. So this actually might branch off into a list as well. Okay. All right, and coming up next, we have checklist. So I'm just going to review this and talk about the difference between these two. So a checklist and a list, two different things. So with a checklist, we start with a question. And so the questions, those are questions that you make up. Okay, so if we think of why is this needed, where will this be used, when will this be used, who does it affect, what is the main goal, how will this be implemented? So essentially, you create your own questions, and through those questions, hopefully, I'll see answers to those questions after you create them, ideally. Through those questions, you help use that to help guide your research. And these are questions that we typically want to ask anyway in the design process. And but they start with your questions, start with these leading words. Why, where, when, who, what, how. It doesn't have to be these questions. They can be other questions as you relate to the design problem. But essentially, the checklist starts with questions. And through those questions, you're able to further explore the problem. Whereas a list is very similar to the normal list that you're used to. It can be used for multiple things. So you might have, if I say use a list, you might wind up with multiple lists for different parts or pieces of your project or design problem. So for the list, though, a minimum of 10 words. That will help you progress your research. That really helps you kind of sift things out. And it must relate to your design development and or your audience. So you're not just going to write a list of random things. You want to make sure that it's targeted. So here, if I'm using Spencer's Coffee, that's downtown, and also on the bypass. They have a new location. You should go. It's awesome. If I'm using Spencer's, so I'm gonna say if I'm thinking about Spencer's currently, like what do I know? What do the consumers know about Spencer's? So I would say it's got a cool hip vibe. It's contemporary. If you think of it as a physical space, there's industrial muted tones, a really rich, texture rich environment. They have custom coffees, homemade pastries, and fresh food. It's a place for community. It's a gathering place of sorts. It's local. It's not a chain. It's an exclusive experience because they are a mom and pop coffee shop. Like everything is very tailored to you, and you really get that vibe. And they sell and host local art. They use their walls as a gallery space. They also sell local goods, and it's cozy. It's a very cozy, intimate environment. So, if we look at these words, we can draw a connection and kind of start to generate visuals. Like if I'm creating a logo and I see the words like cool and hip, industrial, muted tones, I obviously wouldn't immediately think, oh, lime green and hot pink for a new logo for Spencer's. This really helps drive me conceptually and visually if I hone in on the words and find those connections. All right, moving on, guys. Hang in there with me. Thumbnails. This one's pretty obvious, and you guys are used to this. Again, you can scan them in, or you can take a picture of them. If you are working digitally and you want to do thumbnails on an iPad, that's totally cool with me too, as long as you can get them into your digital binder. I don't care how you do thumbnails, as long as you do them. So again, quick thumbnails, you will have 5 or more for each of your projects. That'll be specified in your assignment sheet. So a thumbnail is at least 2 by 2 in size. It's a swift but clean, recognizable sketch. So these aren't perfect, but I get an idea of what the logo is going to look like, right? And these are pretty tight for thumbnails. So your thumbnails do not have to be this tight. If they're a little messy, that's okay. But I should be able to look at it and see what the concept is, okay? And various ideas. So I want to see that you're playing with different elements. I want to see that you're playing with different arrangements and really thinking about whatever it is that you're working on. And then lastly, we have a mood board. If you've had me before, you're very familiar with mood board. Mood board's a great place to start because it just gets you to thinking about the visual aspects of what you're working on and helps drive that creative direction. So again, there will be a mood board, probably a couple of options for mood board templates in your InDesign template that I will provide you. for your binder. But these are just a couple examples. Mood boards should include potential type treatments, patterns and styles, style inspiration, possible color swatches, so 3 to 5 colors usually, illustration style inspiration, photography styles, button styles, and buttons, that's more like web interface. Navigation, that's more web interface. Layout, that could be related to anything, a website, a brochure, whatever. And any other items that inspire a particular mood or vibe, and notes on what this mood board represents. And make sure to, these aren't labeled, but make sure to label, parts of your mood board. Okay. So if we're looking here, I can see I've got some logo style inspirations here. I've got some colors. This yellow color is a little more dominant, so I feel like that's probably going to be one of the more dominant colors in that mark. And then I've just got some photo inspiration imagery there. If we look at this one, I've got the Feeding America logo because this student was creating a sub brand essentially of Feeding America, so she put that logo on there for inspiration. And she kind of took cue from the Feeding America colors, but she built out her own color palette based on her research. So I've got some food imagery because her program was the Snacks for Packs program. I've got some icon style imagery so I can kind of see where that is going with the creative direction. And then lastly, your final mock-up. You may or may not have a requirement for a mock-up, but if you do, I just wanted to show you some examples. So the final mock-up shows, this could be a physically printed piece. So if it's package design, you could actually take a photo of the final printed piece, or if it's a digital piece, you can show me the mock-up. This should be the final solution that has been refined and polished. So I don't want to see the in progress as a mock-up because that does me no good. I want to see the final one. Okay, so this is essentially a piece that you could take, throw on your Behance, throw in your digital portfolio, boom, done. So we're already building those pieces and you have those. All right, so that's just a quick overview of ideation and research. I will also provide some other resources for you on either Basecamp or Blackboard.